We are live here at the Dedicated Show. I'm Kate Strashny, the host of the Dedicated Show and founder of Dedicated. Today we have a special guest with us, Mike Ferguson, who is going to talk to us about data management and analytics, and we'll talk about the key trends and key activities that we can expect in this space in 2024. Now, Mike is the CEO of Intelligent Business Strategies. He's the conference chairman for Big Data London and program advisor for Data Universe. I first met Mike at Big Data London, where I was hanging out with all the rest of the data vendors. We had a blast at that conference, and I can't wait to bring him up on the stage. But before I do so, for those who are tuning in live, I always like to ask the question of where are you tuning in from? I know we generally have a pretty global audience, so as you're joining the show, just let us know which country, city, state you're joining us from. And we are also taking live questions from the audience, or if you've got comments on what we're talking about, please feel free to interact and participate in the conversation on either YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter, or I guess I should say X. At this point, no one's calling it X, by the way. I think everyone's still calling that platform Twitter. Anyways, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Mike up on the stage here. Mike, welcome to the Dedicated Show.
Thank you, Kate. Real pleasure to be here. Many thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Of course, and I'm very excited to have you on the show because well, we met, as I mentioned, at Big Data London in what was it, September
September. Yep.
2023. It
Yep.
was my first time in London. The people there are just so nice. I was really surprised. I was not born and raised, but I was raised in New York, so the culture of London was just so warm. It was probably the only place I ever considered potentially moving to in the future just because of the people.
Really?
Yes,
Well, it's a big place, obviously a bit like New York, but of course it was raining in September. It was absolutely torrential rain, if I remember rightly. But no, it was a great conference. I think that was the eighth year of Big Data London, and is now the largest data and analytics event in the whole of Europe. So um, about 20,000. I think we had 20,000 delegates at the event.
it was
It was
massive.
pretty massive. Yeah,
And the
yeah.
energy was just so positive and great. I absolutely loved it. I hope to come back another year. So, Mike, before we get into the topic of data management and analytics and talking through trends, I do want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit to the audience and let them know what does your typical day look like and sort of talk through some of your accomplishments that you're most proud of throughout your career.
Oh, okay. Well, my typical day, I do a lot of work these days from my home office, but a typical day is going to be obviously looking at my sales pipeline because I always try to make sure I'm um, keeping that moving on that side. I've obviously got three forms of business. I have my research. So just to give you an idea, I get about 50 press releases a day coming in on data and analytics. Just in the data and analytics sector, it's an insane amount of announcements. A lot of them are repeats. There's different sources repeating the same announcement, but nevertheless, I have to filter through all of that and understand that and make changes to any material I have. May even trigger me contacting vendors to understand, get a deeper dive on what they've announced. If I haven't been briefed prior to announcement, a lot of vendors do brief analysts before an announcement. Um, so that's my research side, and obviously I write about things. I also update all my material for my presentations because um, another part of my business is education. So, for example, tomorrow I'll be teaching classes in your to an audience in actually I think Asia Pac tomorrow. So I've got a pretty early start tomorrow morning. So I think starting at 7:30 UK time because they're ahead of me. You're behind me, but so yeah, I've got my education side. I actually teach classes in data and analytics in about 9 different countries, most of them in Europe where I live. Although I obviously do present fairly regularly in the U.S. I've got 2 trips to the U.S. lined up in the next 3 months. So and then I travel extensively in and around Europe as well. So I teach classes on data strategy, on data mesh, on governing a distributed data landscape, on data catalogs. I teach classes on data warehouse modernization, migrating warehouses to the cloud. Um, all of that. If you're interested in any of that, or any of your viewers are, they can always look on my website, intelligentbusiness.biz or biz, as we say in the UK, and you can see the educational classes up there. So, and then obviously there's consulting. So I have a number of clients that I work with over many years, sort of on a retainer kind of things, and then also, new consulting opportunities arise as well. So, I've always been a hands-on guy, so I still get involved in implementations. Often working with implementation teams these days, rather than doing, I'm not 7 by 24 in a same client all day, every day.
Yeah.
I'm sort of moving between clients. And I tend to not do very long 12-month kind of extensive contracts or anything like that where it's a full-time job. I tend to do shorter term contracts these days. But yeah, I mean, that can be, with any vertical industry, whether it's banks or manufacturing or pharmaceuticals or insurance, or I cover a range of those. I'm not kind of focused on any particular vertical industry there. Although, to be honest, based in the UK, I do a lot of my consulting in the UK. The consulting I do is often in London, which is very heavily skewed towards financial services. So,
Yeah, makes sense.
you can't not get involved with a bank or an insurance company at some point in your career working in London. But no, I mean, I do consulting right across the world. I have clients in the US. I have clients in the Middle East. I have clients in Europe, right
Mhm.
across Europe in different countries, and I've traveled extensively around there doing that. So I
Where
guess
are you
sort of.
now? Are you home now?
Oh, I'm home. I'm in the UK
Okay.
right now for a
Okay.
change. Yeah, I got reintroduced to my wife a few times already this year. So
So you have a lot going on, and you still managed to get on the dedicated show. I'm feeling so honored
yeah,
right now.
yeah,
Thank you, Mike.
I'm honored. Thank you very much for the invitation. I didn't even know I was on your radar.
Of course, of course. And we've got comments and questions coming in. I'll take this question here from Christina. So she's asking, how do you balance it all, managing so many different big things at once? Any tips for prioritization and staying organized?
Yeah, stay on your foundation. My whole career has been data and analytics. I've never gone off of it. I did once. I had a very bad experience. Or stepped outside my comfort zone, started doing a little bit of consulting in an area. I realized I'm like, no, this is way out of my depth. I'm like, just stop this. Just backtrack and go back to your base. Stay where you are. So um, yeah, but I have to admit, it's a very different world to when I started. I'm 40 plus years now in data and analytics, and the pace of change these days is ridiculous. And I think, in fairness, you can't, me nor anybody on this planet can consume everything going on.
Yeah.
And so you have to, I guess, focus to where I see my clients on mainstream data, let's say data and analytics stuff. And you can see pockets of new categories or whatever emerging. For example, a couple of years back, data observability um, emerged, and in fact, 2022 was the first time we talked about that at Big Data London. And if you remember last year, we had the data ops theater was extended to include data ops and data observability, because I added that to the theater. It wasn't there in 2022, but it was in
Mm.
2023, and we had a whole slew of data observability vendors on the floor in September. But yeah, so you try to identify those and also see the trends. So I think trends also vary around the world. different geographies, you'll see different things going on. Also, I'm fortunate enough to see different geographies working at different speeds. I mean, even within Europe, you'll see northern parts of Europe often moving more rapidly than southern parts of Europe. Um,
Do
but
you think that's because of the culture of sort of maybe being more acceptable to potential risks and ability to go through failures and sort of get back up, or do you think it's something else that's sort of influencing the speed of
I think
acceptance?
culture has a lot to do with it. I mean, to give you an example, Italy is probably an economy as big as the UK almost. I mean, I think the largest economies in Europe would be Germany would be number one for sure. Then probably UK and France are pretty evens.
Hmm.
Um, and then Italy, though, is not that far behind at all in terms of size of GDP. But in terms of technology adoption, and if you're a leading edge telco or something like that, they'll always be on the edge of where technology is, right across Europe, no matter what country you're in. But generally, Italy's conservative. They change more slowly, than they have in the past. Fantastic. Some pockets are really you know big specialities. Open source developers down there, for example, there's a lot of them.
Hmm.
IoT is real big down there too. So I'm not saying Italy's but in some areas it's behind. But that's true, I think, in Southern Europe in general. Um, but if you go into northern parts of Europe, certainly UK, there's multiple markets within Europe. UK, for example, market is not the UK. Is not the UK. It's probably UK, Ireland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and to some extent the Nordics, because they all kind of come to London a lot.
Hmm.
Um, whereas if you go to France, that's its own market. If you go to
Right.
Germany, Austria, Switzerland is a market. I mean, so
That's true.
so you get these different markets going on. But I think it's fair to say also, I mean, culture has a lot to do with it. I mean, I think Germany is far more careful about their IT spend, in the sense that they really want to check things out
Hmm.
and do a real thorough job of evaluations, and they will exhaust that pretty well, um, before they make decisions. But then they go for it. Then they really go for it. Whereas I think UK is a little bit like the US to some extent, where people are quite prepared to get technologies in, kick the tires around it, try it out,
See what
understand it,
happens, right? Like,
fail fast, that kind of thing.
right.
That definitely differs around Europe.
Yeah, thanks for that. So you mentioned, speaking of different countries and travel, you mentioned earlier that you have two trips planned to the US. I'm assuming
Yes,
one of those trips is for the upcoming Data Universe.
certainly is. Yes, that's in April, so looking forward to that. I'll be there before that, but that's just for an analyst briefing. So,
Okay.
but yes, I'll be at Data Universe in New York in April 10 and 11. So
Yeah, and what's
looking
your
forward to that.
role? I know you're the conference chair for Big Data London. What's your role for Data Universe?
Oh, I'm not the conference chair for Data Universe because I'm on a different time zone.
Right.
So no, I'm just a member of the advisory board,
Hmm.
and obviously the reason for that being is because Data Universe is owned by the same company that owns Big Data London. So um, and obviously they like what we're doing in London, so they kind of asked me to bring a few things that we've done in London to New York, which we're doing. So do you want me to talk about those?
I would love for you to talk about that. And the other thing is, thank you for bringing sort of Big Data London to New York, because I'm in New Jersey and it's like a
Well,
40,
I,
50
I
minute
mean, if I
ride
if
away.
I'd, if I had my way, I probably would have brought a red double-decker bus and a phone box and parked it outside the
Can
Elliott
you do
Center.
that? You
But
should do that.
yeah, it would have been kind of cool. But no, we um, it's going to be a New York show for an East Coast audience, I guess. I'm sure there will be people coming from further afield like me. But No, it should be it should be fun. It'll be smaller because
Mm.
obviously Data Universe is the first time out. Um, whereas Big Data London's been going 8 years. So Big Data
Right. So being that
London's
it's the
much
first
larger.
time and
Yeah.
you're on the advisory board there, what are some of your goals that you're trying to achieve with this first ever Data Universe event?
I think to be at the heart of data and analytics, without a
Mhm.
doubt, to establish that there and to really address the hot topics within most organizations. We don't really want to be peripheral to what big corporations are doing in the US. What we really want to do is, is be addressing the main concerns. And obviously, I don't see too many differences between what big corporates are struggling with in Europe as than they are in the US. I mean, so in that sense, I think the same issues will come up. I think as long as we're, let's say, addressing those whilst at the same time with an eye on innovations and new things that are coming over the horizon, as well as addressing, well, things that are probably bigger in Europe that are less in the US, but I think will be. I mean, for example, Europe has always been a bit of a governance centric place. European Union was the first to come out with GDPR, for example, and then a lot of other parts of the world followed suit. Although correct me if I'm wrong, but European Union is legislation that covers 27 countries.
Right.
You guys did data privacy at the state level, as far as I remember,
Yeah, I
right?
recall the what is it, the CCPA, the
Yeah, for
California
California, and
Act.
I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh my God! I mean, like that's 50 GDPRs in one country. I mean, I would have to work on the ground floor of a building if I was in the privacy space in the US, because I'd be diving out of windows every five minutes.
That's why we have bars on window. Actually, windows don't open.
Yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't want to hurt myself because so much complexity with
I
all of
know
those
it's
states. I'm
complex
thinking,
enough, and then when you break it
yeah.
up into all
So
these,
I was expecting it to be a federal thing rather than a state level thing. But anyway, there you
I
go.
mean, things might change in the future, but it is very complicated. I agree.
Yeah. So for global organizations, of course, they have to be compliant everywhere, which is even more complex. And I'm pretty heavily involved with a lot of clients in that whole challenge. But
So, like we were talking about the other data vendor earlier, and Scott's here in the audience. He said he's like, I can charge my phone with the energy on this show. Good. I'm glad to see that, Scott. Thanks
oh,
for
I don't
joining.
know. He generates a ton of energy on his own. I mean, Scott's an
I think he
institution, right?
charges all the devices around him at all times. So, last question on the data universe, Mike. I know we were a couple of months out, and I see the agenda is being finalized. I'm excited to speak at Data Universe as well, and I know you have some sessions coming up. So, wanted to see if you can share a sneak peek of maybe some of the sessions that you're most excited about.
Well, there's 5 tracks, so it's
Five
much.
stages, yes.
Yeah, 5 stages. Yeah. So, but yeah, well, I'm bringing one thing that we done every year in London for the last 8 years. We're bringing it to the US, which is a great data debate. So I get executives from, let's say, the vendors, senior
Okay.
executives on stage. So the great data debate historically in London has had Turing Award winners on it. I mean, I've had Dr. Mike Stonebreaker, for example, who has won every award in research known to man on the debate in London. Of course, he invented Ingress, Postgres, Vertica, Streambase, Illustra. I mean, he's CTO of Tamer
Mm,
as well. So I mean, guy's an amazing man, and I've had CTOs of uh, big vendors, CTO of data for Microsoft, for example. Raghu Ramakrishnan has been on it. I've had Ali Ghodsi, CEO of
mm,
Databricks,
database, yeah.
on it. And so yeah, we're gonna bring that debate. It's a keynote panel in London. We're bringing it to Big Data London. I'll be moderating that this year with four great speakers representing the vendors. Then I'm pretty excited to be doing a fireside chat with Rob Thomas, who is now Chief Commercial Officer of IBM. He's really, really senior executive at IBM, and I've known him for a very long time. Rob's for a long time managed the whole data and analytics arm of IBM worldwide. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And of course, they're pretty fired up with their new Watson X platform that they're doing work for, in and around that, along with WatsonX.ai and WatsonX governance.
Hmm.
So I'm doing that. I think I'm looking forward to some, other, keynote sessions in and around things like ethics. Um, and also, of course, um, various aspects of data governance, as well as, of course, generative AI. I mean, generative
Okay.
AI is still
Right. You can't go two steps back here.
still dominating to some extent. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Mike. So I think let's shift over to data management and analytics trends, right? I would ask you for maybe the top two priorities that you think companies should be focused on when it comes to data management this year.
Well, for sure, I would have to say data governance. I
Data
mean,
governance. Okay.
I think for me, the difference now that when I first started out, and I've spoken at lots of data governance classes, conferences over the years, it was dominated purely by data quality. But
Mhm.
the umbrella of data governance has gotten bigger. It's now data privacy, it's data access security, it's data retention, it's data sharing and data loss prevention. All of that's getting rolled in there, and of course um, that's getting even bigger now because of the European Union
Mhm.
AI Act, which is about to become legislation in my part of the world.
It's
And
not
even though
final yet, right? I've read
no,
some articles
not
about
final
it.
yet,
Okay.
not final yet. And bearing in mind, UK is no longer part of the EU, but no doubt will follow. I'm sure about that.
Right.
But it thrusts, AI governance into the mix, um, and that's a different ball game, and very obviously, um, companies are, I think, already big corporates are already looking at this and making sure that they've got that base covered. So I think that will add even more to the, let's say, the burden of data governance. But I think we all often look about data governance as a necessary evil. I see it as a commercial advantage today. I mean, I think it's now the point where companies are realizing that data and AI is going to underpin every single part of their business. When I first started out, it was marketing and finance, and that was kind of about it. you
Hmm.
know but today, people in HR want it. I mean, people in every aspect of a business want to make use of data and AI, and so if that's going to underpin every part of the business, you'd bet you need a solid, a high quality foundation of reusable data that people can depend on. Not much point having um, inaccurate predictions coming out of machine learning models, right? I mean, there's not
Right.
much.
Oh, of course not. It's just like if
So
you got that
yeah, I mean,
data, then
I think it's, in fairness, that's become um, a real a real must have these days, even in the boardroom. I think that's fair to say.
right.
Um,
So we've got a yay to data governance here from
yeah,
George.
and out of that, by the way, if I was going to pick a discipline, I think in Europe, at least, the last 4 or 5 years was dominated by data quality.
Mhm.
But in 2023, I saw a change, and the change was that data security and privacy became the number one governance discipline. I'm not sure about that in the US, but I wouldn't be surprised if the same things happened there.
Do you think it's because you guys have fixed data quality or
Oh no, not in a month of Sundays. I mean, no way have we fixed the data quality problem. We've got data sources coming out our ears. We've got software as a service applications being adopted. Obviously, I guess the more we can get away from human entered data, perhaps we might get towards better quality. But anywhere where humans are entering data, we got, fat fingers and all that kind of thing going on the keyboards. So, no, data quality is a major issue for a
yeah,
lot of organizations and will be for a long time to come, another couple of decades, no doubt. But I think the big difference now is the technology is getting a lot better, but of course, the volume of data is growing. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so the first one, I guess you're talking about data governance with it underpinned by data quality, data security, data privacy. Would there be a second big priority, or was that all baked into that big lump of data governance?
Well, no, I mean, data governance in general obviously incorporates things like catalogs, which are pretty
Mhm.
central to it these days, and the ability to the problem that's not solved really yet, which is yes, you can define policies and store them in one place, but enforcing them across a distributed data estate is not easy because there's no industry standard to uh, push policies to multiple technologies, and for that reason, we're going to see, I think, what I saw 20 years ago or more when we had client server, and we saw the need to uh, we have how do you manage multiple servers? So we saw the emergence of distributed systems management
Mhm.
tools, vendors like Tivoli, for example, which IBM bought, and then Computer Associates, if I remember, was heavily involved in that space, and several others. And that really involved, well, you could administer from the center, but you had to have all these software agents on various platforms to enforce everything. And I think the same thing is going to happen on data governance. It's just going to be like a data governance platform with tentacles everywhere. Kind of allowing those policies to flow down to the underlying technologies. Unless, of course, you're a giant with all of your own technologies will be plugged into your own catalog, get your own policies.
Right. So you mentioned that the technology is improved to sort of help us get closer to better data quality, and we could have policies written even by generative AI with the support of writing a specific policy for specific software and technologies. So that's two out of the three things people usually talk about, right? There's systems, which is the technology. There are processes, which is the policies that we talked about, and then there's that third P for people. And I think that's the biggest problem, or probably the thing that's causing the biggest problem in data quality or implementing data governance. You can have a policy for just about anything and everything and a procedure and a step by step guidance. But
Sure.
how do you enforce it? How do you actually make the people touching the stuff and the data actually do the thing they're supposed to do?
So I think here there's ownership of the data has got to be by the business, and clearly data owners are going to be accountable. I think for it's not just responsible. I think accountable for making sure that policies are there. But I also believe that data will be published before it can be shared. And the publishing process is going to have checks involved to make sure that that you can't publish data unless the policies are in place in order to govern it and protect it. Um, so I think that's one. Of course, there are some policies which will be enterprise wide. Well, you could argue, is that true? I mean, data privacy, for example, you would say, legal will probably want to have a say in that. Your legal department. So in that sense, many of those kind of policies would be enterprise wide, unless you're a global business, in which case it's not just a single data privacy policy for certain kind of data. It could be multiple privacy policies for the same data because, as you say, GDPR in one region, CCPA
Yeah.
somewhere else, and so you may have to have different versions of the same policy for the same data in different geographies. Um, but nevertheless, typically you're not going to have different departments just turning around and saying, well, we want this privacy law and our policy, and we want that privacy policy. So I think, in a way, there's enterprise-wide stuff, and there's um, data owner or business domain oriented policies, and in a way, you could argue that that's federated. And I
Hmm.
kind of think in 2024, I think the word federated is going to be a big deal. Um, I really believe, you know, you could say centralized, which was centralized IT. Well, we've kind of outstripped that. We've kind of it's become a bottleneck. Business have bypassed it. Can't wait for IT to do everything, and then we
Right.
got the we
Shadow
got
IT and all that.
we got the other end of the spectrum, right? Well, everybody's doing their own thing. Well, hiring their own people and whatnot. But you've got to somewhere find middle ground. We can't just oscillate from one end to the other and back and forth. And I think middle ground is federated. So it's not
Mhm.
centralized, it's not distributed, it's federated. And I think the federated piece keeps it coordinated. And that's why I think CDOs have become so important in organizations, because in a way it's their office that's the coordinator
Mhm.
and has to be involved in networking and keeping everybody aligned with what business strategy is. But so organizationally, I think organizationally, the people issue is a as big a priority, a problem, as big a problem as any other aspect of this. I mean, yes, technology is important, but if you can't get the people right, it's it. You can make rope to hang yourself with even with the most modern technologies. Believe me.
So we're jumping out of windows. We're hanging ourselves. This is a very positive conversation, guys.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean,
We have one more you're gonna get to, I'm sure, so we can have really interesting references.
but I think the other thing as well that at least I'm seeing in Europe, is a lot of companies. I certainly saw last year when I did some research that people were beginning to say technology limitations were an issue for them. And I'm
Hmm.
going, really? So I kind of started contacting and following up on that. And I said, is that because you're missing the technologies? And in many cases, it wasn't that. They maybe had the tech, but the big frustration, and certainly from my clients, was lack of tools that work together. They just didn't integrate, and so the bridges were out between the tools, and so they have to rework stuff or redo stuff across tools. There's real frustration mounting in big enterprises about that, and I
Hmm.
think that's one of the reasons why this idea of a data and AI stack has become popularized. And I think companies are prepared to rationalize some of their best of breed tools to get to a point where they can get a stack of tools integrated, whether that's a single vendor data fabric or whether it's a modern data stack with pre-integrated um, uh, joint development initiatives between complementary vendors. But I definitely see organizations realizing that that's going to benefit the business now that data and AI is so enterprise wide and so needed, and across every part of the business. We could, they feel they could speed things up if they are able to do that on a common stack, and
Hmm.
and so I kind of predict the end for standalone projects. I think most customers are moving up the maturity curve into what I would call, data and AI community,
Hmm.
really trying to get reuse going on, and looking for technologies that are going to help with that and fuel that.
Right. So thank you, Mike. And I know we're getting close to our time, but I wanted to circle back to at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned you have this sort of three roles that you're focused on. You're the industry analyst researcher, you're an educator, and you're a consultant. So I wanted to ask if you could just pick one to do for the rest of your career, which one do you think that would be?
Oh, geez, that's so hard.
I know.
Um,
Jeopardy music.
I think I would have to say I'd have to say I wouldn't want to give them any of them up, to be honest, but I would have to say consulting. And the reason I would say that is
Mhm.
because you get exposed to real business problems in consulting.
Okay.
And unless you have that, and thank God I do,
Yeah.
um, I would not be able to match technology to real business problems in the way that I should be doing for my customers.
Hmm.
And so I think consulting to really understand the issues within everyday business, keeps me grounded. And so therefore, I think if I wasn't grounded, I'd better just stop, right?
Well, that absolutely makes sense, and especially from an educational perspective, I feel like the consulting keeps you on top of the hot
Yeah,
issues
it
that you can
does,
actually
and you know what's going on
yeah.
in real world business, and you can tie that into your education and show how technologies and methodologies can can help solve those business problems, and you can relate it to real business examples. I mean, so I think I'd have to say, yeah, the consulting is super important to me.
Got it. All right. I used to do consulting, so I remember just it was also financial services, very heavy in the financial services space. So when you were talking about it in the beginning, I'm like, yeah, I feel you. You get pulled into that
I
space.
must say I do love teaching. I've taught for a very, very long time now. Since I started my own business for 30 years, even all the way back when I was at Colin Date, going all over the world, teaching classes. So I've educated for a long time, and I learn a lot teaching.
Mhm.
Because people share what they're doing, in their organizations, in the classroom, and I learn a lot, and I love it. But yeah, unless I had my real world experiences, I think I'd definitely not be in a good place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Mike, as we wrap up, I always like to ask the guest where can people go to follow up with you if they have more questions or if they want to connect, if they want to use your industry analyst services or your educator services or your consultant services or your, conference chair or your
No, don't worry about the conference chair piece. I mean, you can always see me at Big Data London and come talk to me there. I do one-on-ones and stuff like that. But no, you can go to intelligentbusiness.biz, I think I should say in the US.
Z, BIZ.
BIZ, as we say in the UK, but BIZ, intelligentbusiness.biz, and look on my website. You can see the classes, and if you want to contact me, info@intelligentbusiness.biz,
Okay.
um, would would reach me.
Okay, perfect. Well, Mike, again, I appreciate you coming on to the Dedicated show. I know how
Oh,
extremely busy
thank you
you
so
are,
much.
so thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you.